When I found Salem, I thought I was rescuing him. But the truth is, I think he was the one who chose me. It was a stormy autumn evening when I first saw the black cat. I was on my way home from work, the wind howling, rain pouring down in sheets. As I hurried past a cluster of alleyways, I caught a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my eye, a flash of dark fur darting between the shadows. I slowed, peering into the alley, and saw him sitting there, a black cat, soaking wet, staring at me with wide, unblinking yellow eyes. I've always had a soft spot for animals, especially cats, and something about this one made me stop. He didn't look feral, but there was something off about him. He seemed too calm, too still, considering the weather. His gaze was unnerving, like he was sizing me up, deciding something. Without thinking, I crouched down and called to him. "Hey, kitty. You lost?" He didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring. The longer I looked into his eyes, the more uncomfortable I became. There was something unnatural about the way he held my gaze. But then the cat let out a soft meow, almost as if he was pleading for help. Against my better judgment, I extended my hand, and to my surprise, he padded forward, rubbing his wet fur against my leg. I couldn't leave him there in the storm. So I picked him up, cradling him in my arms, and brought him home. At first, everything seemed fine. I dried him off, gave him some food, and set up a little bed for him in the corner of my living room. He ate hungrily, then curled up and started to purr, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the entire room. It was soothing, almost hypnotic. As I sat on the couch, watching him drift off to sleep, I couldn't help but smile. Maybe he was just a lost pet who had wandered too far from home. That night, I woke up to the sound of scratching. Groggy, I sat up in bed, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. It sounded like it was right outside my bedroom door. Salem, I thought. He must have wanted to come into the bedroom. I got up and opened the door, expecting to see him sitting there. But the hallway was empty. Confused, I walked down the hall, calling for him softly. "Salem?" No response. The living room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. I stepped into the room and saw him sitting in the corner, staring at the wall. His back was to me, his body unnaturally still. "Salem?" I said again, louder this time. He didn't turn around. His fur was standing on end, and his tail twitched violently. My unease grew as I approached him. Something about his posture was wrong. He was too tense, too rigid, like a coiled spring ready to snap. I knelt down, reaching out to touch him. That's when I heard it. A low growl, deep and guttural, unlike anything I had ever heard from a cat. My hand froze in midair as Salem's head slowly turned toward me. His yellow eyes locked onto mine, but they weren't the same as before. They were darker now, more intense, filled with something cold and malevolent. His lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing sharp, gleaming teeth. I stumbled back, heart pounding, suddenly aware that this cat, this creature, was not what it seemed. The growling intensified, reverberating through the room. Salem stood up, his body moving in a way that was almost unnatural. His limbs seemed too long, his movements too fluid, like something else was controlling him. I backed away, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The room felt colder, the air thick with a suffocating presence. I could feel eyes on me, not just Salem's, but something else, something unseen. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just leave the house, not without knowing what was happening. Suddenly, Salem let out a blood-curdling hiss, his body arching as if possessed by an unseen force. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. And then, in the dim light, I saw it, something dark, something formless, moving in the shadows. It slithered across the walls, shifting and writhing, growing larger with every passing second. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath fogging the air. Salem's growl deepened, merging with the shadow's movements, as if they were connected, as if they were one. The purring sound, once comforting, now became twisted and wrong, echoing around the room like a chant, a demonic lullaby. Panic gripped me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the nearest lamp and hurled it at Salem. The lamp shattered against the wall, and for a moment, everything stopped. Salem let out a horrific yowl, his body convulsing as if something inside him was being ripped apart. The shadows writhed violently, the air filled with the sound of whispers, words I couldn't understand, voices too distorted to be human. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The lights flickered back on, the room was still, and Salem collapsed onto the floor, motionless. I stood there, frozen in place, trying to process what had just happened. My mind raced, searching for a rational explanation, but there was none. Slowly, I approached Salem's limp form, half expecting him to spring back to life. But he didn't move. Trembling, I knelt down and touched him. He was cold. Dead. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the lifeless body of the cat I had brought into my home. But as I stood up, ready to get as far away from him as possible, something caught my eye. His eyes. They were still open, wide and unblinking, fixed on me with that same intense, malevolent stare. And in the reflection of his dark pupils, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A face. Not my own, but something else. Something twisted and wrong, with burning eyes and a wicked, knowing smile. It was watching me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows in the room seemed to shift again, though nothing moved. I could feel it, the presence, still there, still watching, still waiting. I ran out of the house that night and never went back. I don't know what Salem was, or what had possessed him, but I'm certain of one thing: I didn't rescue that cat. It rescued me. And now, it's out there, waiting for someone else to take it in.